Welcome back to our channel Seeds of Kindness. Here we are today with a new story. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. The cheerful intro played automatically in Earl Thompson's mind as he sat in seat 14C, staring out the oval airplane window at the blanket of clouds below. His daughter had helped him start that YouTube channel 2 months ago, insisting that the world needed to see the way he planted trees for every sack of wheat he sold. Earl didn't think many people cared about a Kansas farmer rambling about soil quality and small-town kindness, but the slogan still echoed in his head at odd moments. He wished it had been echoing during a calmer time, though. Certainly not now. The plane shuddered with a violent jolt that sent soft drink cups tipping and passengers gasping. The cheerful ding of the seatbelt sign felt almost mocking as overhead bins rattled and one popped open, spilling someone's hat and paperback novel onto the aisle. Earl grabbed both armrests as turbulence deepened into something far more alarming. A second jolt hit, deeper, heavier, like the growl of something mechanical going wrong. Then the oxygen masks dropped. Gasps erupted. A baby wailed. Someone whispered, "Oh God," while another muttered prayers from memory. The lights flickered once, twice, then steadied but not comfortingly, more like a warning. Earl wasn't new to danger. He had driven tractors in hailstorms, chased runaway cows across flooded fields, and even once gotten stuck on a burning combine. But sitting in a sealed tube 30,000 feet above the ground, that wasn't something he could fix with a wrench and stubbornness. The intercom crackled sharply. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. Please, please prepare for a crash landing." Those words changed everything. The panic that followed wasn't noisy at first. It was quiet, stunned, the kind of terror where people freeze instead of scream. The silence lasted only a few seconds before whispers turned into frantic voices. A businessman in the row ahead fumbled with his phone, attempting a last-minute message. A woman in 12A clutched her chest. Flight attendants tried to follow their emergency training, but their trembling hands betrayed them. "Sir, please put on your oxygen mask," one attendant said as she hurried past Earl. But Earl wasn't panicking. Not outwardly. His mind was working with the slow, grounded certainty of someone who had faced hundreds of emergencies back home. The rumble in the plane wasn't turbulence, it was mechanical distress. A crop duster pilot could recognize that sound anywhere. His boots, still dusted with Kansas soil, pressed firmly against the floor. He listened, felt the angle of the aircraft, noticed how the left wing dipped just slightly lower than the right, and he knew engine trouble, bad trouble. Another loud thud shook the cabin. A few people screamed. The plane tilted again, sharper this time. Earl tightened his seatbelt but leaned forward, peering down the aisle toward the cockpit door. The flight attendants exchanged frightened looks. They weren't telling passengers everything, probably because they didn't know everything. Earl took a deep breath. Maybe it was foolish. Maybe it was crazy. But he had flown crop dusters for 3 decades. He had navigated malfunctioning engines, weather tantrums, and emergency field landings. He wasn't a commercial pilot, but he knew enough to recognize they were in deeper trouble than the captain said. Another blast of turbulence hit. Overhead lights flickered again. This time Earl sensed hesitation in the plane itself, a sluggishness, as though it were fighting to stay steady. He unbuckled his seatbelt. A flight attendant rushed over. "Sir, you must stay seated." Earl stood anyway, one hand steadying himself against the overhead bin. His voice was calm, not forceful, but firm enough to cut through the surrounding panic. "I need to talk to the pilot." The attendant blinked. "Sir, the cockpit is locked. You can't." "He's gonna want to hear what I have to say," Earl interrupted. His tone wasn't arrogant. It wasn't dramatic. It was simply factual, like a man pointing out that the corn wouldn't grow right unless the soil was turned before the rain. Passengers around him stared. "Is he serious?" someone whispered. "Sit down, man," another yelled nervously, but Earl didn't move. His mind was focused not on fear but on possibility. He knew a flameout when he heard one. He knew mechanical coughing from an engine starved of pressure. He couldn't fly this giant metal bird alone, but he could help the pilots keep it alive long enough to find ground. Another jolt, another dip. This wasn't a moment to hesitate. Earl nodded once at the attendant. "Tell the captain the farmer in seat C needs a word." And astonishingly, she did. The flight attendant, who had rushed to the cockpit after Earl's request, returned far more quickly than anyone expected. Her expression had shifted from panic to something that looked like bewildered hope, like a drowning person spotting driftwood floating their way. "Sir, the captain wants to see you." Gasps spread through the rows. People who had been praying stopped mid-sentence. A woman clutching a rosary stared wide-eyed as Earl stepped into the aisle. "Who are you?" the businessman beside him blurted. "Just a farmer," Earl said simply, adjusting his faded baseball cap. But Earl didn't look like just a farmer in that moment. He moved with a sense of purpose, a steady confidence that cut through the chaos like a plow slicing soil. Every eye in the cabin followed him, some filled with desperation, others with disbelief. As he followed the flight attendant toward the front, the plane shook again, harder this time. Drinks toppled, overhead bins rattled, and two passengers screamed. Earl braced himself on a seatback until the shaking steadied. "Is it that bad up there?" he asked quietly. She swallowed. "The right engine is out. And the left," her voice cracked, "isn't looking good." Earl nodded grimly. Figures. He had suspected as much. The vibrations weren't random, they had rhythm, like the uneven thumping of a tractor engine sucking its last breath. As they reached the cockpit door, one of the passengers called out, "Save us, farmer." The words were shaky, half desperate, half hopeful. Earl didn't respond, but he tipped his head slightly, not a promise, not a reassurance, just acknowledgement. He wasn't a hero. He didn't think of himself that way. He was simply someone who refused to let good people go down if there was still something that could be done. The flight attendant unlocked the reinforced door with trembling hands. It swung open. The cockpit was chaos and red lights. Alarms beeped in uneven patterns like panicked heartbeats. Warning indicators flashed across multiple screens. The captain was pale, sweat dripping down his forehead. The co-pilot looked younger, frantic, and exhausted, his hands flying across controls that weren't responding the way they should. The captain turned as Earl stepped in. "You're the man from 14C?" "Yes, sir," Earl replied. "I hear you've got an engine acting ornery." The captain blinked. "That's one way to put it." He gestured urgently. "Come in." Earl stepped forward, closing the cockpit door behind him. The cockpit felt small, too warm, too tight, overloaded with tension and failing machinery. But Earl didn't feel fear, only focus. "What's working?" he asked. "Not enough," the captain muttered. "The right engine is completely gone. The left has intermittent power. We're losing altitude faster than we should. Hydraulics are inconsistent, and autopilot is dead." Earl nodded slowly as he processed the information. His mind worked like a mechanic diagnosing a stubborn machine. Flaps, barely responsive. Trim, hanging on. Landing gear, unknown, might deploy, might not. Earl exhaled. "All right then." The co-pilot stared at him. "Sir, with all due respect, this is a Boeing 737. This isn't a crop duster. You can't just—" Earl raised a hand gently, not to silence him, but to reassure him. "Son, I know I ain't trained for one of these big birds. I ain't here to take over. I'm here to give you another set of eyes and another brain that's been inside a cockpit during trouble more times than I've been to the movie theater." The captain studied Earl's face and must have seen something steady there, something reliable, like the kind of man who fixes his own tractor, builds his own barn, and keeps calm when storms roll in. "All right," the captain said. "Pull up that co-pilot seat." Earl sat. The chair felt unfamiliar, too many buttons, too many flashing lights, but he closed his eyes for 1 second, inhaled deeply, and summoned 30 years of flying over golden fields. Small planes, big winds, unpredictable engines, and instincts honed by repetition and survival. His eyes snapped open. "Show me your altitude loss per minute." Earl frowned. "We're dropping too fast for a typical engine-out glide." "Yes," the captain said. The left engine won't maintain steady thrust. We're fighting it. Then stop fighting it, Earl said simply. Ease off. Don't push her too hard. She's hurt. Treat her like she's hurt. The co-pilot's eyes widened. How did you? She was starving for air pressure, Earl muttered. You were choking her. The captain let out a strained laugh. I can't believe this. Earl leaned forward, scanning the sky ahead through the windshield. Clouds were breaking, and far below, a wide stretch of flat open land. His land. I know a place, he said quietly, but we have to aim for it now. The captain swallowed. Where? Earl pointed ahead, steady as steel. Straight toward that patch of Kansas dirt. That's my farm. The cockpit felt like the inside of a storm cloud, cramped, buzzing with warning alarms and thick with tension. Earl sat in the co-pilot's seat, his calloused hands hovering just above the unfamiliar controls. This was no crop duster. This was a heavy metal beast with more buttons than a fancy tuxedo and more blinking lights than a Christmas parade. But fear didn't settle on Earl. Focus did. A deep, grounded sort of calm that came from a lifetime of solving problems that didn't care whether a man was ready or not. The captain wiped his forehead again. Earl, we're losing altitude faster than we can compensate. Even easing off the throttle won't keep us level for long. Earl nodded. She's wounded. But wounded don't mean finished. The co-pilot, hands trembling, pressed another button that did nothing. She's not responding. The left engine isn't producing steady thrust. It's coming in waves. Surging, Earl murmured. Means she's trying, but something's choking her flow. But don't you push her for more, she'll stall completely. The captain shot him a look. Can you actually land a plane this size? Earl didn't flinch. I can land anything if it's got wings and the ground's wide enough. The captain stared at him for a long second, long enough for the plane to dip again, causing the co-pilot to curse under his breath. Then the captain nodded. All right, Earl. What do you recommend? Earl pointed out the cockpit window. The clouds were thinning, giving glimpses of the landscape below, flat plains stretching far and wide, dotted with patches of brown winter wheat, farmhouses, and long dirt access roads. Kansas is full of open land, Earl said, and right now the biggest, flattest piece under us is my farm. You see that long brown stretch? The captain squinted. That's a field. Yes, sir, Earl said, and she's long enough to hold us. The co-pilot shook his head. A field isn't a runway, it's uneven terrain, it's dangerous. Son, Earl said gently, every runway started out as dirt. My field's firm, the soil's dry, and I clear that patch every season. It's smoother than you think. Another warning alarm beeped, another altitude drop, another violent shudder. The plane wasn't going to make it to an airport, not even close. The captain exhaled shakily. Fine, Earl, guide us in. Earl leaned forward, studying the horizon, his instincts sharpened. The situation wasn't good, but it was workable barely. All right, he said. First thing, stop fighting her. You don't wrestle a wounded animal. You guide her. The captain reduced inputs on the yoke. The plane steadied, not by much, but enough. Co-pilot, keep our nose just a hair above level, Earl ordered, surprisingly authoritative. If we dip too low, we'll hit too early. If we pitch too high, we'll stall. The co-pilot swallowed and complied. Another loud metallic groan echoed from the left side of the aircraft, deep, grinding, like metal teeth scraping. That your left engine tellin' you she's barely holdin' on, Earl muttered. But she's still blowin', so don't you dare shut her off. The captain shot him a glance. Descending at this rate, we'll reach ground whether we're ready or not. Then let's be ready, Earl replied. The cockpit door opened a crack, a flight attendant peeked in. Captain, passengers are panicking. Earl didn't look back. Tell them this plane is landing in safe hands. The attendant blinked at him, stunned by his confidence, then nodded and closed the door. Earl's voice softened. We're gonna bring her down slow and long. I'll call it out. You fly it. The captain nodded. We'll follow your lead. Earl pointed at a line of trees far ahead. Aim between those cottonwoods. My field runs straight past them. The captain adjusted their heading. Good, Earl said. Now bring your descent shallow. Let her ride the air, make gravity do most of the work. They sank lower. The ground grew larger. At 3,000 feet, the left engine sputtered violently. The whole plane lurched sideways. The co-pilot shouted. Earl grabbed the armrest with one hand and steadied himself. "Don't panic, she's coughing. Not dying, ease her right. Right, not left, she'll fight the turn." The captain obeyed. The plane rolled back to center. At 2,000 feet, Earl squinted through the glass. His heart tightened not from fear but recognition. The silver grain bins. The long shadow of his barn. He smiled faintly. "That's home." At 1,000 feet, the captain asked, "Landing gear?" Earl blew out a slow breath. "Drop 'em. If they lock, great. If they don't, well, we'll slide in one piece if we hit the field straight." A grinding sound. A clunk. Then another. "Gear down," the co-pilot said, astonished. "Locked." "Good," Earl whispered. "Get ready." The field was rushing up to meet them. Earl placed one steady hand on the captain's shoulder. "All right, boys," he said calmly. "Time to land this bird." The field grew larger in the windshield until it filled the entire view, a long stretch of Kansas earth, flat as a baking sheet and waiting like an old friend. Earl could almost smell the soil from inside the cockpit. He had walked that field barefoot as a boy, plowed it as a young man, and harvested it every season of his adult life. But he had never imagined he'd one day try to land a Boeing airplane on it. The captain's voice was tight. "We're coming in too fast." "You're fine," Earl said calmly. "Just keep her steady. Let her glide, don't force her." The plane shuddered again, a deep, moaning vibration rattling through the floor. The left engine sputtered, coughing like an old truck climbing a hill with a broken carburetor. "Come on, girl," Earl whispered. "Just a little farther." Altitude dropped rapidly. 600 feet, 500, 400. The co-pilot called out every number like it was a countdown to fate. Earl stared straight ahead, eyes sharp, jaw set. And certainty was the one thing Earl carried like a tool in his pocket. The nose dipped slightly. "Ease her up," Earl said. The captain pulled gently. The plane steadied. "Good, good. Keep that nose level. She's heavy, but she'll listen." The field came closer. Earl recognized fence posts, the tractor shed. They were almost home. "Power down," Earl instructed. "Don't cut it, ease it. Let the ground come to you." The captain eased the remaining thrust. The engine groaned. The wind roared louder. The field rushed upward. Passengers screamed. Someone shouted Earl's name like a prayer. Someone else fainted. But in the cockpit, everything slowed, quiet, focused, controlled. "Hold her," Earl said. "Hold her. Now set her down." The wheels hit the earth with a violent jolt. Bam! The plane bounced once. Twice. A third time, the kind that could snap landing gear if the angle was wrong. The co-pilot swore loudly. The captain gritted his teeth. "Don't fight it," Earl barked. "Let her roll. Let the dirt catch her." The landing gear slammed into the ground again with a metallic grunt. Dust exploded on both sides of the fuselage like tan clouds. The cabin shook so hard overhead compartments burst open. Bags, jackets, and snacks rained down. Passengers held anything they could grab. The aisles filled with terrified screams, cries, prayers. But Earl didn't look back. He had eyes only for the field. "Stay with me," he whispered. "Just a little more." The plane veered slightly left, a dangerous tilt. "Correct right," Earl shouted. The captain pulled. The plane straightened. Dust roared beneath them, a deafening storm of earth and noise. They were slowing, not enough yet, but slowing. "Flaps full," Earl ordered. "Flaps barely respond. Try." The co-pilot hit the controls. The flaps dropped unevenly, but enough to drag the plane harder against the air. The speed dropped more, more. The plane hit a patch of firmer soil and jolted again. A wingtip threatened to dip, but the captain corrected it in time. "Almost there," Earl said. "Let her coast." The engines coughed their final cough and died completely, giving the plane's weight entirely to gravity and ground. Dust swallowed the world outside. The plane slid another 100 yards, 50, 20. Then finally, it lurched to a grinding, groaning stop. Silence followed. A thick, unbelievable silence broken only by the ticking of cooling metal. Earl sat still, breathing deeply. The captain stared forward, shaking. The co-pilot covered his face with both hands, overwhelmed. Then from the cabin behind the door a sound started rising. Crying, laughing, cheering. A wave of raw human relief rolled through the plane like warm wind after a storm. "They're alive," the captain whispered, voice cracking. "We're all alive." Earl nodded once, slow and humble. "That's the idea." They unbuckled. The captain clapped a hand on Earl's shoulder. "I've flown for 26 years," he said, "and I've never seen anything like what you just did." "I ain't special," Earl replied, "just a man who knows his land." They opened the cockpit door. Passengers gasped when they saw him. "It's the farmer. Sea saved us." "Bless you." A dozen hands reached out. People cried, hugged each other, reached toward him like he was a miracle walking. Earl held up his hands, embarrassed. "I didn't do it alone. These pilots did the real flying. I just gave 'em a good place to land." The emergency slide deployed. Sunlight streamed in. Cool Kansas air filled the cabin. One by one, passengers stepped onto Earl's field, dusty, shaken, alive. Earl followed last, touching the plane's side gently. "Welcome to Kansas," he murmured. "Sorry about the rough landing." Behind him, the passengers gathered in the field, staring at Earl as if he had grown wings. And far above, the endless sky stretched wide. The same sky Earl had flown under all his life. The same sky that had carried them all safely home.